Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest live episode of VOX VOMITUS. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the Kindle Award-winning novel Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as Pretty Ugly and the recently released The Japanese Box. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of The Bourbon Books, which includes Dibs Since September, Move on Melinda, and Climb the Salmon Ladder. Joining us today is internet celebrity DEVRIE BRYNN DONALSON, author of You're Going to Die Alone.
And other excellent news.
Okay. I'm glad you have the book because Allison and I both did the audio. So
yeah. Oh, so you have heard my voice in your ears for so many hours.
No, for many,
we've been talking
many
for
hours.
days. You don't remember? Now I feel hurt.
You know what? It's been a blur. I've just been having such a great time.
So I always love it when like I'm listening to memoir and the author is the narrator. It seems like kind of weird when they're not.
Yes.
Back when I was a child, this is an old man and it's a young woman's story.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been like if I could have gotten like maybe Christopher Walken, I would have done it. But there's very few old men narrators that I would have been like, you could nail this.
Yeah, you really got it. So DEVRIE, welcome to VOX VOMITUS. We are obviously not super professional. We don't have questions planned out. We're just gonna like take this on a wild ride through string cheese and
I brought my cheese platter. It's not really like a nice one, but this is provolone.
Oh,
and these are big old chunks of feta from the improvised dinner on Monday night that only I liked. Welcome to being a mom where your kids are food, whatever. It's
girl
fine.
dinner,
like
mom dinner.
Mom dinner. So I'm just going to do a really quick shout out to, we are all at the same agency. You two share an agent. I am just an agent sibling of yours, but cheers to Talcott Notch.
Oh, you got merch?
Why don't we have?
I was at New England Crime Bake over the weekend.
That's why.
And
there's a lobster on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm about to text an agent.
Why is the lobster in handcuffs? What kind of crustacean crimes?
It's crime. Oh, all the crimes.
Okay,
that's a really good
It's a very, very naughty lobster. So, DEVRIE, tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the book. You're going to die.
Wow.
Or tell us a lot about yourself.
If they want to do that, just tell them to read the book because the book is about you. So, I mean, about your book. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, the book has a lot about me in it. Certainly.
Thank you, Amy.
I think. Oh yeah, merch. It's about time.
You, boo. We're expecting. Okay, everybody, all of the agent siblings listening to this right now are all going to be demanding this. So sorry, you've now committed to a lot of merch. All right, we're done.
Christmas is early. Things about me. Let's see. I consider myself overall as a job a storyteller. I like to tell stories in multiple mediums, all kinds of them. I think it's probably the oldest job profession. I don't know. I think of it as sort of a gift or responsibility on the planet. Every time I moved to New York recently and I'm doing museums and stuff. I'm trying to be in my New York era, put my little headphones on, go bop around. And every time I get to a museum where there's like ancient depictions of stories in, physical mediums and that kind of stuff, I get this like rush of like, yeah, we've been doing this forever. So I think of myself that way, partially because I wear a lot of hats, partially because it helps me in my head legitimize the fact that I am a quote unquote influencer, which I like to refer to as a semi-professional internet clown, which I think, it's kind of the modern day clownery, like I stroll up, people are like, they summon me on a little square. They're like, dance clown. And I do a little jig and everyone laughs and we carry on. So it started with that, kind of steamrolled into being able to write this book when I was manifesting with the moon that I was going to write a book of poetry to satiate my inner teenager who wrote a lot of angsty poetry. I still have some of it. It is beautiful.
I am glad all of my teenage journals got very damaged in a house flood because I feel like I would be too tempted to read aloud from my rhyming love poem era.
Oh, and did you cause that flood by any chance? Because I'm not putting it past you, honestly.
Yeah, I summoned it.
Or was it the lobster?
I was going to ask. I mean, it's water, it's crime, it's a crustacean.
I'm saying he's finally gotten caught after all these years.
Got caught.
No, my teenage poetry is like I showed I read it to my parents once and they were like, that's it, you're going to therapy. And I was like, you don't understand. And then looking back, I remember being so sure that it was like the best writing. Like at one point I went to an English teacher and I was like, read this poem I read in my free time and give me feedback. And they were kind of like, it's
No, thank
okay.
you.
And I was like, and like walked away. And I found it
You
recently
don't
and was
get
like,
me, okay?
yeah, it was
Whatever boomer.
horrendous. Yeah, whatever boomer was very much the vibe. So I was like, I'm going to write a book of poetry. I'm going to self-publish it. Like my grandma will buy a copy and that'll be enough for me. And I didn't tell anyone. I pretty much literally looked at the moon and told her. And within about 3 weeks, I had half a book of poetry written because am I sitting on feelings or what? And I got a DM from this random lady named Amy who was like, hi, I'm a literary
Pretty
agent.
random, all right.
Yeah. She's like, I'm a literary agent. I've been watching you for like 5 or 6 months. Please tell me you've wanted to write a book. I was like, oh, that's so weird. Yeah, I would love to write a book of poetry. And she was kind of like, that's not.
Yeah, like, oh, can it be not
Start
that?
again.
Yeah,
Let's
she was
start
like,
again.
maybe
But what
like,
I'm hearing is that Amy is like connected with the moon, which is new to me, but I'm sure she probably wouldn't deny it that she's like, so
Amy's a witch.
well, you knew the power came from somewhere. So then I was like, yeah, but I also have this idea for a novel and this idea for a book. And she was like, oh my God. So we started working together just after, that was like the turn of the new year going into 2022. And then I think the first week of February in 2022, I quit my job on a whim and I flew to Edinburgh with no plans or money or friends in that city. And that turned into kind of a social media moment. A lot of people saw it, and in complete reckless support of my utter abandon of my life, Venmo'd me beer money for my birthday because I was turning 30. And 9 million people saw it, and enough people Venmo'd me beer money that I rented an apartment in Edinburgh for 6 months and wrote this friggin' book.
that is amazing.
I
I don't
love
think I've heard
that.
of, I've heard of people who have, I'm not going to throw any writers under the bus, but I've heard of some who have very wealthy parents and they went and wrote their novel in a chalet for like 9 months. And I'm going,
Sure.
must be nice to have a chalet.
Yeah, that's very relatable.
But Venmo beer money is a lot funnier than like,
like
chalet.
collecting beer money from strangers who were just like, hell yeah, burn those bridges, girl. I was like, okay. And I got this little apartment at the base of the Royal Mile, like in Holyrood. And it was so like dank and wet. And there was, it was like a kind of a basement, but not really. And there was, I kind of had a patio, but not really. And there was this giant pigeon and this very skinny squirrel that fought for snacks on the patio every day. And I would
And they
like
became
sit
your
there
best friends.
Like I'm
okay,
picturing that
there
they
it's
have,
literally in the book. I was like, much of this book was written with the company of these two creatures, which I created salacious backstories for.
yeah, I feel like they could have their own internet show with like the squirrel and the pigeon. And
Yes.
I do love that the pigeon made it to both the book, but also the cover of the book where it is eating part of the title. But in my head, he looks like he's got SpaghettiOs, which makes more sense to me.
Good
but
for him.
I mean,
I was
we
thinking
don't
it was
want
Cheerios.
well, yeah, either way, we want carbs, but yours
I
are the ones
always
that
want
lower your
carbs.
cholesterol, Jennifer. Mine are the kind that I still crave. I'm like, I know it's not good for
Amen.
me, but I still want Chef Boy Oh Boy, as my dad used to call it.
Listen, emotional and mental health is just as important as physical. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to make that balance call.
You need
Well,
your
a little bit
emotional
serious.
support carbohydrates.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
my doctor's not allowed to be watching this episode because he's like, Allison, we've talked about your cholesterol and this is not helping. I'm like, geez.
Sign off, doctor. It's provolone
the
time.
doctor doesn't need to be here. I've been eating like nothing but potatoes for like a solid week and a half now.
Okay. But when I do that, that's called connecting to my Irish heritage. So just, don't hate.
Amen. I
Yeah.
think I have a skit about that very thing at some point. So book, I mean, long story short about the book, it's like a collection of stories that ask questions about what I would say is like the nature of change, what it's like to be a woman in the world, the current world that we live in. Can we change? How to choose who you want to be on purpose? And like just kind of giving people permission to forgive themselves maybe for who they were when they didn't know better, or for things that they've done in the past that they still feel stuck to, and take a deep breath. And it's also, I tried to be a little funny in there. So there's some giggles. So I would say it's like a collection of musings, stories, and like poetry. I snuck the poems in. I did it.
And you're like, don't skip the poems. And because I was listening to it, I guess I could have, every time a poem came up, hit change, but it doesn't say, by the way, this was a poem. Like you have to wait and start listening. I'm like, oh, she's doing a poem now. But if you're just looking at it, I guess you could have done that, and you could have put in big letters, do not skip me. I meant for you to read all of this.
10 out of 10. But I feel like the only way like on the audiobook that you could pick up that it was like a poem is
you have
voice.
A poetry voice.
I have it's like almost a bedroom voice, but not quite.
You get huskier. All of a sudden you're like,
I'm like, whiskey girl.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is a poem. You can tell because it's in a lower register.
Right. But then when she's talking about to my inner child, then that's a little creepy if she's talking to little kids that way. Like, don't do
well,
that.
it was to my mother's inner child. Let's be clear.
That's not better in terms of
that was more. It's not creepy sensual. It's more like low and quiet, like if you were approaching a
wild animal.
Yeah, something like
feral
that.
coyote who's looking at you like this.
You know,
but again,
I'm like flat palm, provolone in it.
Yeah, you don't want to skip those, even if it sounds like, oh, she's doing her come hither voice, where it's the don't sneak up on it voice.
Yeah. You never know.
Could be either. So I dabble in like personal essay and memoir and stuff. None of it's really like out in the world. It's just in a folder on my computer.
Excuse me, the Japanese box is what that is.
I know,
it's
actually, that's true.
All of it.
I always pretend that that's fiction.
It's okay. You fictionalized it till someone reads it and goes, Jennifer, this is, other than the first story, which I know is not true. The rest of them, I'm pretty sure, are all completely true.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to read the entire thing so that then I feel like we're on a vulnerability level that's the same because you know a lot about me.
I know I do. Was it scary putting all of this out into the world? Or was it like liberating, like jumping off a cliff into a nice warm body of water?
Like finish that sentence, Jennifer.
Just like jumping off a cliff. You know,
just like
that
was
my invasive
freedom
thoughts.
there.
I think liberating,
that's
like
a
driving
great
into
question.
traffic.
That's a great question. I think the truth is, it wasn't really either of those things. I think the process of writing it, I healed a lot because I worked through things that I didn't really realize needed attention by writing these essays. Because at first it was just like, can you write a funny collection of essays that's sort of an expansion of your TikTok style? And on TikTok, I do like 60-second monologues that are they're mostly funny, kind of like ranty, sometimes have like a feminist tone. It's mostly like bottled chaos, like raccoon in a dumpster eating pizza vibes. So there's not, every once in a while I surprise somebody with some like deep heart and soul on TikTok, but the attention span's a lot shorter. So it started kind of being like, can you do a collection of essays that's like an expansion of this? And in the pursuit of writing an entire book, which I don't know if you guys know this, you got to write a lot of words in that. In
so many words. That's why the
many.
idea of a poetry collection is easier for me. I always think, I'm like, oh, because it's less words. The pages are shorter. It's still going to look thick.
Yeah, I'm still going to.
That's just because you can't do math. So you don't realize that all these still add up to a lot of words.
Yeah, but it is like half the words. I will give you that. And especially if I draw little drawings for each one that's on the other page.
The white space.
Yeah, I'm about to negative space that straight into a friggin' page count. But as I was trying to kind of come up with more and more
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah. As I was trying to come up with more and more things to say, it was like, okay, I'm digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And then as I was going back and looking through what I had and being like, this rings hollow. I need something more vulnerable. If I'm going to ask a reader to go into this vulnerable space, I need to prove that I can go there first and that they can trust me as a guide. And so as I kept kind of building out the book and really narrowing in on and centering around kind of what I wanted the impact to be of the collection, there were some things in there that I really, really had to like confront for the first time in a measured way, in a way that was like, I'm walking through these bad feelings and these things that have happened to me, not just to like punish myself, but because I'm trying to alchemize them into something helpful for someone else. And so by the time that it got to the point where I was publishing the book itself, it didn't feel scary. I wasn't worried about, the thing is, like, by the time I'd finished this, I was like, I know exactly who I am. These stories they're solidified. That's the truth. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of who I am as a person. So it wasn't like this fear of people like seeing or knowing things. You know, there's a chapter in there called 300 and what is it? 22 year, 364 day and 22-hour-old version, or 29 year. You know, it's this, I wasn't worried about that so much. And I wasn't like, finally people will see me, because truly the book is not, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the case. But I think truly, like, for me, when I took on the project, I was like, okay, if I'm going to write this, I'm writing it to try to add good to the world. And there's an impact I want to have here. This isn't a book about me. I tried to write not a book about myself, but a book that was for somebody in specific, like a specific person in my head who, if they read this right now in their life, could it help them? And so,
well,
by
I
the
know
time
your audience isn't like the bro dudes with their fish, but I do feel like they all need to read that section and stop posing with the fish. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was written to them.
I mean, but I mean, like, they may not be the audience for the entire book. Like, probably they're not your generic, this is the person I'm thinking would probably be getting a lot out of this, but they should read that one.
They should.
I wish they'd read the whole thing, frankly. If they had the
they'd be like,
patience.
oh, wow. Gosh,
Yeah.
women are complicated. They have feelings.
Look at this whole person in front of me.
She's like almost like a human person, even though she's a woman.
Put down the fish, pick up the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time it was published, I was just, it felt almost like not a freedom, not a fear. It felt almost like a responsibility of like, I've been given the opportunity to tell stories on a grander scale, to have people's attention, to be offered kind of their hope as they go into this book with some fear, with some, you know, hope that they find something that answers a question or whatnot. And I take that responsibility fairly seriously. So for me, I was just like, yes, this feels like the right thing to do, if that makes sense.
No, it does. So I think, like, I always think when I like publish an essay or something like that, I'm just like, I just hope my mom doesn't read it. But she's never read anything I've written. So like, I don't, it's like just an unfounded fear I have, like, oh,
sure,
she's going to pick up this one.
Yeah. I had mixed feelings about the family reading this one. I was like, you don't need to. You really don't need to. I didn't want to be like, don't. But I was like, don't need to. And, you know, that's been part of the journey, is having the family react.
Have any of them started commenting on any of that? Have you had feedback from that, or saying,
oh, sure.
I would like to put my own little epilogue in here. And they're like, you write your own book.
I always feel like my mom doesn't read my stuff, but like some of my other family does. And they'll say things like, oh, like, did that actually happen? Like, oh, I remember it differently. And I'm like, yeah.
You weren't even there.
You weren't there.
Thank you for your input.
Or like you were there and you're not remembering it the way that I'm remembering it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
Exactly. And that's like the beauty, I think, of memoir and personal essay and things like that, and even creative nonfiction, because we all have our very unique experiences.
Yeah.
And two people can live in the same house and see and feel things drastically different.
That is the argument. So as long as people can like wrap their heads around that, I'm like, okay, carry on, read the book. If I feel like that's not going to happen from here on out, I'm going to have like a no fly list for like, please family, don't read this. I will say my grandma, I was speaking to her the other day and she was like, I can order your book now, right? I'm like, absolutely. And she's like, what's it about? And I was like, well, it's kind of, and I gave the same spiel I give you. And she goes, so I won't understand it. And I said, you know, I don't even think you need to read it. And she was like, okay. I was like, cool.
That's when you tell grandma, sorry, grandma, it doesn't come in the large print edition yet. I'll let you know when it does.
I'm just like, put it on your shelf and don't open it.
Or put it on your coffee table and say, my granddaughter wrote this, and be very happy and proud. And again, don't open it. But it's a very bright cover. I mean, it's eye-catching. I like it. It's the same color as my thesaurus, but
sure is.
It's not a thesaurus.
She's a neon gal. This little, you know. My favorite part about it is, frankly, the author title or a photo, which I had to work. I had to fight a little bit to get this in there.
Hey,
but
what's the author photo?
Is it the pizza one?
Okay.
Yeah, it's me
Pizza?
eating pizza with both my hands at once.
We used that in the thumbnail for this episode just because.
Oh, amazing.
I had to go looking for that because it was not on your website. Your website has the one where you just look terrified, which I used earlier. Okay, and Amy says that you designed the cover, and I do love the cover, even though I do think that the pigeon is eating SpaghettiOs, which, I mean, I guess everyone can impute their own round carbohydrate.
You're allowed to interpret that. Yeah,
I mean, it's way too small for a donut. I
kind of see it as like if like the O is you and you've just been like sitting kind of cozy in the word that you've always been in, the little world you've always been in, and then the pigeon is life, man. And he comes along and he plucks you right out of your comfort zone and he like takes you on a little ride. The pigeon is life, man. So if you want to interpret yourself as a SpaghettiO girl, Allison, that is your right.
Look, I'm kind of wearing the same color as the sauce in SpaghettiOs, so I am channeling SpaghettiOs right now.
I'm
getting
just
hungry.
Kind of blur my eyes a little bit. I think you might be Chef Boyardee. Like there's something happening up there with canned pasta and you.
And I'm not even Italian. He probably isn't either.
Love it. Do you feel bad that the squirrel didn't get any love on the cover?
I don't. You know what? I don't, because squirrels, they don't.
He was a skinny bitch anyways.
They don't need a PR person. You know what I mean? Like I would feel bad if I was talking about rats a lot and rats didn't get like rats and squirrels are the same creature in my eyes, but squirrels just got like a really good PR guy. You know what I mean?
What they have is a better tail, and that's really all it boils down to. Because I've had pet rats; they are amazing. They are loving.
Delightful.
One of them bit my nose because they thought I was a carrot, but he felt bad about it. I could tell.
You're wearing a lot of orange.
Yeah,
but I wasn't that. I mean, I don't always wear orange, but again, I was very sad when my rat died. My rat died like the same week I broke up with my boyfriend at the time, and I was really sad about the rat. But again, the point is they have better tails, and that's really why people don't like rats, because they've got those long, skinny tails, and they're kind of.
They didn't choose that. Yeah, you know, they didn't choose that.
We can't choose our body type.
Pigeons don't choose to have maimed little feet. You know what I mean? They're just doing their best. I had rats too growing up, by the way, and I had a similar situation. It didn't bite my nose. It bit my bird's foot because my bird landed on its cage. It was like a friggin' menagerie in there, let me tell you. And that was probably my first introduction to like horror movie. Kind of, I opened the door and was like, because the bird is flying around the room. It was the whole thing.
I love it. I grew up with birds, and the birds would fly around our house. I did not have rats, but when I was real little, I found a chipmunk in the yard and decided to pick it up, and it bit me on the face.
Yeah, there's that.
And then,
that feels right.
Yeah, it felt right. And then, of course, I'm bleeding, and my parents were like, now we're going to have to watch you extra close in case I got rabies, but they didn't automatically bring me to the hospital. Just shows
I love that for them.
They were just like, you know what? We're just going to keep an eye on you.
They were like, overreact, not in this house.
Yeah, like
foams at the mouth. What would have been the sign Jennifer got rabies?
That's a great question.
No idea. Like maybe like spraying water on me, and if I got scared like a vampire.
They're like,
I don't
she's
know.
either possessed or she's the chipmunk got her. Either way,
honestly,
we should call someone.
There are a lot of signs that it could be both. So.
Yeah. I mean, it also kind of explains a lot about who I am today.
I mean, it could be like a Spider-Man move over situation. Like you could have gotten bitten by a radioactive chipmunk as a child, and there's just these powers kind of latently waiting for you to wake them up.
Yeah, and that's
have
being
you tried
like
scurrying
cute.
up a tree lately?
I was really kind of worried what kind of powers a chipmunk would give you.
Yeah,
you could put a lot of stuff in your cheeks.
A lot of stuff in the cheeks. Which, you know,
how many grapes? How many grapes can you get in there?
That's not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could store something.
Not down here. This is just old people.
You'd have to try.
No, I'm like, oh, does my chin look weird? Okay.
Mine always looks weird.
The show went off the rails. We're like, okay, let's talk about
the show never started on. We don't have rails.
I love this for the podcast listeners.
I love
this for the podcast listeners who are just imagining three women prodding at their jawline.
Sometimes on my like we're so visual, and Allison and I are be like, oh, blah blah blah, like zooming up to
and then we forget.
Screen.
I basically have to do this deposition style and add in let the record reflect that Allison was pointing and pulling on her jawbones, and then Jennifer was doing something similar, and DeVRie was shaking her head, going, "What have I wandered into here?"
I was just trying. I'm just trying to convince Jennifer to try to go climb a tree and see if the chipmunk comes through.
Maybe
I'd be willing to wait.
Yeah, like
okay. Yeah, text me after and let me know how.
When I get the text, I have fallen in the snow.
I've fallen. My leg is broken now.
Yeah.
Updates will be in the show notes.
Okay. Jennifer tripped on her way to the tree. And
you are a dancer, and that is your prerogative, that you cannot walk on flat surfaces, but you can do amazing other things.
I know, like I do fall down just walking, but
it's true.
Very rarely
I
when
don't
I'm
know.
dancing.
You're making a solid argument for chipmunks. I don't think they do a lot of
power.
just strolling across open spaces. It's a lot of scurrying up and down.
Scurry. It's a lot of scurrying. There's lots of scurrying. Well, and one of the other things that you handle in here is some of the poetry addresses feelings of loss, possibly of like climbing trees, and then of like friendships and things like that. And I don't want to lose Jennifer to climbing a tree, so I'm not going to let her do it. I don't supervise her very well, so she could do kind of whatever. But
I'm always running amok.
I know, but those losses of friendships, like you address how they're just as important, especially for those of us who are like, these are my emotional support people. Like, we're not allowed to carry emotional support dogs. No one has said I can't carry Jennifer around as my emotional support Jennifer. Like, I'm allowed to. Thank you.
I mean, the emotional support chipmunk / puppy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the theme that you came back to a lot in there, especially that idea of like this person being like your memory keeper. And that part really resonated with me. And some of this stuff, like my sister and I, we sometimes do the whole, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Because neither one of us have great recollections of some of this stuff. And we're also old at this point. So there's that. But our mom was our memory keeper. And when she passed away, it was like, okay, we're now all screwed because no one's going to remember anything because our dad, forget it. Like, we love our dad, but he wasn't around for a lot of the stuff that happened, let alone even if he was, like, was he paying attention or was he kind of off on his own little world? So that whole idea of like, okay, but if this person isn't around anymore, who is going to be like that outside verification, like two-factor identification? They're the other factor for what you have up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the essay that you're referring to. I think it's called What If No One Remembers Me? And it was the hardest for me to write, for sure. It was about, it's an essay kind of going through the disintegration of a very long and important friendship from the time I was really young. And that the ending of that friendship and one other that was equally important and long in my life was what spurred me to run away to Scotland, essentially. Like, I was running from the pain and where it physically felt like it lived and trying to go somewhere where they'd like never been, like Scotland, Edinburgh, that's a haunted ass town, but it didn't have my ghosts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I really, the death of friendships is like truly heartbreaking. And that for me was the essay in your book that I felt the most. And maybe because like I too have lost 2 lifelong best friends within like a couple years of each other.
Yeah.
Just because I still don't know why. Like, I don't know.
Wild?
One day we were friends and the next day completely ghosted. And I was just like,
I'm hearing this story like more and more. The more that I'm talking about this book with people. I'm actually working right now on a second book just dedicated to this topic because I feel like there's so many. I haven't spoken to a single woman who hasn't said, this happened to me.
Yeah.
I was at a brunch the other day for like a beauty thing. And I was at a table of 4 women that were complete strangers. And by the end of it, every single one of them was talking about how this had happened. 2 were crying. One was like, I was just thinking about her on the train on the way here. One was like, there's the text message where it happened on Tuesday. And one was like, no, I've never been able to talk about this with anybody. And it's just like, particularly for women, our friendships are so vital for so much of our survival in life and support in ways that are not built in romantic relationships, but they're also so trivialized culturally as like, if these things fall apart, it's either at best just like growing pains. And at worst, it's like, well, that's just girls. They're catty. Yeah. And it's like, no, this was a life partner to me. Like,
yes, because you said it beautifully in the book when you talked about how when you get into like a romantic relationship when you're young, you don't that's not forever. Like there's part of you that knows it's not forever. But why would a friendship ever end? Like, why would 2 people who love each other so much and have been through thick and thin talk
about growing old together? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a single super close girlfriend where we haven't had at least one conversation where like, I can't wait till we're old and like sitting on the porch and like cackling at children and that sort of thing. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think I use the analogy of like building a house and like when you're building a relationship and you're laying out the blueprints and stuff. And in a romantic relationship, like you build a trap door, you know what I mean? Because you know at some point it might start shaking and it might come down and you need to get out. In a friendship, you don't. And so when it comes down, it's like the rubble comes down on top of you and it is very, very damaging and it takes forever to get out. And then you're left like just sorting through the pieces, trying to find something to save that isn't like tainted by this fallout, you know, like are my memories still okay to feel good about? It's a very strange grief that we don't have like a structure for.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I ran away to the Midwest after my friendship broke up. I wish I had gone to Scotland. That would be a much better plan.
So much the better
moved
place
to Ohio.
To run away to. Like, come on, that's not even compared Midwest versus no. And I almost want to hire like a private eye. I don't know if Jessica Jones is available, but to hunt down these women, the one specifically who ghost, because I know in your book you and one of the friends at least did have kind of like a closing conversation, and I, you know, for the ones that this has happened in my life, there's some that they've just kind of drifted away and it's like, we used to be so close, but I can kind of see what happened. But I do have one that just completely ghosted me. And I know where she is only because of her mother, who, again, like, I don't really know what exactly happened. And I would love to have that private eye to go to all the people who ghosted and say, what happened? What set this off? And again, I don't really know what was going on in their heads and how they perceived the friendship. But all I can imagine is that what they perceived in the friendship was so very different than what we were experiencing, that there was a disconnect and they never communicated it. And so I just wish that, like, for all the ghosters out there, you know, don't ghost.
Send us an email.
Send us an email.
Even if it just says, you know what, you're a total bitch. You know, even if it says that, like, that's fine.
I think for me, like, the person that ghosted me had been my best friend since literally the first day of kindergarten. We met on the swings. And I just like never heard, there was no warning. There was no like, our friendship had friction. There was no anything. It was just one day. She never answered the phone again, never responded to a text. I've called her and I just like listened to her voicemail like you do with someone who's died. And for me, like, I know she's alive somewhere in her house, like laughing. So, like, I know she's there, but in my life, she died, or like almost in a way, like killed herself in my world. And like, it's like my experience with interacting with her in the wake of that choice is the same experience that people go through when someone just like suddenly gets hit by a car.
Yeah, and very true.
It's traumatic.
But it's so strange because it's like, you can't grieve it. Like, I can't look back on those memories in like this rosy way of like, oh my gosh, well, I love, like, because it was her choice to leave.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
How often do people come on this podcast and cry, by the way? Am I a first timer on that?
We've had a few, but it is not.
I think I've cried.
Yeah, you
really,
I think I've cried.
I wanted the crown. I wanted the crown. But I think for like coping with that kind of, I had to make a choice of like, instinctually, you want to understand why somebody would do something like that. And if you're hurting, you want to find like a reason for that pain. And it's like, okay, so either she's a bad person or I am. Like, either she's the bad guy or I'm the bad guy. How did this happen? And I kind of had to make the choice to just decide like, no, I don't think that's true for either of us.
Either of you are the bad. Any of us are the bad guy.
I kind of had to be like, okay, well, I have 26 years of data of knowing her, and I've known her to be kind and brave and not the sort of person that would hurt somebody on purpose, and the sort of person who would only do something like that if it felt like she had to for her own like peace and wellness. And so there's some part of me being in her life that's like costing her peace and peace of mind. And ultimately, if I love her, I would rather her have a peaceful life than keep me in it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So do I think that was handled well? No. I think there was better ways to have done that. But at the same time, like, I don't think there was any way that that friendship could have ended that I would have handled it gracefully right out the gate. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I can't say for her what her like anticipation of my reaction would have been. Like, I don't know if she thinks that this was the best way
the
to
easier
do that.
way to do it instead of having a knockout, drag out fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, it's like personally, for me, I would rather fight it out and then be done. Like, it's the not
I think
knowing.
that's the difference, though. Like, I don't think that she fancied a fight.
Yeah.
But it was just strange because it was like, you know, maybe 6 months previous to that, I had literally asked her point blank to her face, hey, is there anything you need from me as a friend that I don't give you? Like, I'm just checking in with my relationships. Is there something am I missing something? Am I not? And I was asking, you know, family members, different friends, this question. And she was like, no, honestly, you're my best friend in the world. You're the best friend I've ever had. And then it was like 6 months later, gone. So I can sit here and speculate all day, like what happened, or did someone tell her something, or this or that. But ultimately, if I'm ever going to have like peace with it, I just have to choose to believe that who I have always known her to be is still accurate. And that for some reason, our lives being together made her life painful. And, you know, part of me is like, she was trying to start over in the same way that I have recently. And like having somebody who has kept your memories for so long, being in the room. Yeah. Can you ever be someone new when someone who's known every version of you is sitting there going, okay, but I know who you've been. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
even if they don't act that way.
No, exactly. No, that's a great point.
I went through every time I would go to a new school, and I don't mean like switching schools. I mean, just you'd get older and you go to a new school and you try to like reinvent yourself. But there's always that friend who remembers you from before. So
it's like, I remember when you peed your pants in kindergarten.
That was first grade, Jennifer. But the
Mine
whole
was
idea,
kindergarten.
Oh, kindergarten. But the whole idea of like, they still remember who you are. And so if you're trying to be someone new and they're still the reflection of who you were, you can't see your new self if they're still reflecting back your old self. And it maybe make as simple as that. But honestly, a lot of it's just that uncertainty of not knowing, like, what was it, especially if 6 months before they're like, we're copacetic. I could ask for nothing else, you know. And then you just wonder whether what the list was so just too deep to get into that they chose the easy lie rather than the more painful truth. And most of us would prefer the more painful truth, but I know a lot of people don't. So it's like,
and I honestly don't think that was it. Like, we weren't, I am a very intentional person in my relationships, friendships, everything. And I'm very intentional about who I want to be and like who I choose to be. And so I really, like, to a point that it's almost pathological. Like, sometimes people are like, stop being introspective, for God's sake, leave yourself alone. And I, you know, ever since I was a little girl, I've had this feeling of like, if there's some kind of love that, or some kind of care or whatnot that I'm not receiving, it has to be my fault. And so I'm going to take myself apart and like find the thing that's not working and put myself back together and try to do those things, which ultimately that's not the case. Right. But the story that I heard from some people growing up was like, if you're not receiving the care you think you deserve, it's because you make it impossible to give it to you. And so then when I have these friendships fall apart, I'm like, it has to be me. Right. Like, it like pushes that button really, really strongly. And it was like, I think I talk about it in the book, in I think the second chapter in the book is called Scotland, Grief and the Vibrator I Hid in My Grandma's Garage. And that second chapter.
And you can travel with a vibrator, DEVRIE.
I know that now. Thank you, Jennifer.
That question that no one's ever really sure and no one wants to risk finding out.
I'm like, who's calling the TSA service line? But that chapter was actually the last chapter I wrote in the book, the second one, because it was like 6 months after the majority of the book I wrote in Scotland, like in that phase where I was kind of running away to lick my wounds in a way. And
or happened licked by that squirrel. Just saying.
He probably would have just kept not. He would have eaten me. He was a vicious little dude. But
that's why he's not on the cover.
I know.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, if you're gonna eat me when I'm dead, no. The pigeon would never. They might have like nested in my hair, but that's kind of respectful.
That's
frankly.
awesome.
Honestly, that
could be like a great hat.
The pigeon has the same vacant look in its eyes as Hey, the stupid chicken from Moana, where it would just kind of peck at you, like not food, and then walk away, then peck on you again. still not food, and then walk away. You don't really
That's an energy I align with 100%. So yeah, that second I just talked about in that one, like it was really a process. Losing these two best friends sort of revealed to me for the first time that I was so afraid of being abandoned when I never thought of myself that way before. Like I've always been very independent. I've always had a very strong sense of self. You know, my mom will tell you that I was like just over 1 year old and she tried to put me to bed in a crib in her room. And I said, no, I sleep in my own room now, and walked down the hallway and closed the door and never slept in their room again. Like,
peace out.
Yeah, that's
peace
like
out,
the
Mom
vibe.
and Dad.
Yeah. And when I was born, I didn't cry. I just stared everybody in the eye in the room. Like, this could have been an email. Why did we call this meeting? So I was kind of like born that way, you know? And then I lost these two friends and I felt so untethered. Like I was like, who am I if these people who had been my chosen people for my life, like not the things that were given to me, not the family I inherited, but the people that I'd chosen, that I'd poured all of this love into. You know, there's photos of us from the time we're 4 to the time I'm like giving toasts at their wedding, you know. If those people didn't love me or didn't like me, who was I at all? And suddenly I realized, like, oh, I've made a lot of choices in my life by holding them up to them and saying, do you think that this fits me? And if they said no, like not pursuing it. And so it was this sort of horrible bittersweetness of like, for the first time, I was untethered, but I was also free to be someone, like we said, new. Or
just discover who you were always supposed to be.
Yeah, to hold it up to yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, instead of having them be the mirror, that you are your own reflection instead of putting that on someone else.
Yeah. And I think it's true that, like, would I, if my friend had said to me before that experience, I can't be someone new when you're in the room, would I have ever understood that? Probably not. Yeah. And I would have fought that. But now if somebody were to say that to me, I would be like, yeah, been there, and like, let it go. So there's just, you know, with these like friendship breakups, I don't think they're modeled for us at all in culture and media of like, I mean, how many movies can you think of right now that feature a romantic breakup? A million off
all
the top of your head. Yeah. All of them. But how many are focused around like how to healthily end or heal from the end of a friendship? They don't exist, right?
Because when we do see female friendships, they're toxic to begin with, and it's like the frenemy situation, or it's the sisterhood of the traveling pants, and everything is always perfect, and they're ride or die until they die, or the movie just ends, whatever. But there's no of that. There's none of those situations where we can see healthy how to move through things like that. And so most of us, we sit there at a brunch with 3 other women, realizing, oh, hey, we all went through this, but none of us talk about it.
Right. And it's like the greatest heartbreak of our life.
Yeah,
I've been divorced and lost a dad and all these things, but like my loss of my best friend since I was 2, and the other one was since I was 4, like I think about them every day. And if they somehow got in touch with me, I would just be so happy. I'm like, let's pick up where we left off. Like I would step in front of a bus for them to this day. And they, I think, hate me. I won't.
Stay away from buses.
Well, there's no public transportation here in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's true.
So it's fine.
Like, you text me when you're stuck in a ditch. Now you're trying to climb trees and step in front of buses. I'm getting worried.
I need that vacation next week.
You really do, but don't take buses, please.
Have some string cheese, a pina colada.
Yeah.
I any pina coladas. I don't think
there's good. You're not even really supposed to be drinking there, but
you're not the first gal that I've spoken to who said that exact same thing. Like, I've gone through all these various losses, including divorce, including death, and nothing has hurt as much as this friendship loss. And I think part of that is the fact that it's like a very invisible grief. Like, there's no, like, who brings you a casserole when that happens?
And it's like grieving the living is just such a complicated thing. And people are always like, well, I mean, she was just a friend. Oh, she's still alive. Well, but you're right. Like, not to you. She's not alive to you anymore.
Right.
Yeah. She's not. And like, the person.
There isn't.
Go ahead.
No, I should say there isn't the sympathy there either for a lot of it, because people then assume, well, what did you do?
What did you do?
Like, it's there's the assumption if that person goes to you, you did something unforgivable and you just aren't taking
Well,
the personal accountability for it or
and I
whatever.
remember like, because I lost like DEVRIE, like 2 friends very quickly. And then, you know, I had the person I was seeing at the time said, it's probably a you thing. If 2 people, 2 your lifelong best friends dumped you, what does that say about you? And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know what it says about me. Like,
Mhm.
Could you help me there? You got
could
any
you help me?
ideas for
Yeah.
that?
And like in my case, the part of that was true was just like I repeated patterns in the sort of friendships that I held dear. And so when I still don't really have any answers about the ghosting one, but at least the one that one essay is about, the who will remember me. Um, it was sort of like I had recreated the same type of relationship over and over, you know, this kind of love that felt familiar and this way of interacting with people that was safe and felt like, you know, this is what love is. And then when I started to kind of learn better ways to interact with people and have relationships, and I started to change a little bit and set some boundaries, um, there was sort of, that was sort of the beginning of the end of that relationship. It's because I started to violate that social contract that we'd previously adhered to for so long. And I wasn't doing anything wrong or bad. In fact, I was kind of standing up for myself for the first time. But the other person experienced it as a betrayal. And like from her side, you know, if you put yourself in her shoes and you were her friend and you were listening to her on a podcast, you'd probably be
She's
100%
on
like,
next
yeah,
week, so we'll find out what
She's coming
I
on next
would
week.
come find you both and physically fight you if that was the case.
I would be like,
I would
we'll
have to
let
invoke my chipmunk powers.
your chipmunk powers.
I don't
Scurry
think
away.
even that would save you. Okay. Like,
but the whole idea of like everybody's got a different perspective, but I think that's part of the reason why there isn't that public support when we go through things like this, because people just assume you did something. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been through death and I've been through divorce, and I know that with the death, the support is overwhelming, and with the divorce, a lot less so, because people assume no matter what happened, they assume, well, you probably did something. And so again, it's the same kind of thing. They assume you did something, that you were not holding up your end of whatever contract they think you should have held up. And even if you could show them, well, here's all the things I was supposed to do and all the things I did, and here's what this person was doing. Again, our assumption is always you had it coming. And I know I personally, for me, like you say, you know, I brought this on myself. I usually do assume the problem is me, because usually somewhere it is. So I know for me, that's kind of how I take things apart and how I go through this. And I go, here are the patterns. And then, you know, Taylor Swift says, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. And that's hard, because then people don't want to give you support, even if you're like, okay, but there's nothing that's ever 100% just one person. Usually it's usually there's some kind of disconnect happening that one person decides they don't want to keep working on. And if you weren't that person who said, I don't want to keep working on, then you are the one who's kind of like, I don't want to see the word victim, but you're the one who, you're not the one who said, I don't want to do this anymore. And then that's why you're like, okay, so it's loss of the power and loss of the control there, because you don't have a say anymore in the relationship, because there isn't one.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think I was treated very poorly in those situations, but like, I'm not trying to find a way to be like, well, you know, it's equal parts, both of our fault. But I think I can find an understanding of like, if not a true understanding of the reason, I can at least come to a piece of like, okay, well, based on the information I do have, I'm going to choose to assume the best of this person, not the worst, which is what I would hope they would have done for me. And just assume that their life is healthier and they're having a better time and it's easier for them without me in it. And ultimately, then that's probably true for me as well. Like if there was some role that I was playing in their world that was stunting their growth, I don't think that I needed to be in their life. I don't think that they needed to be in mine at this particular point. And like, you know, for some friendships, it is true, like growing pains, you grow apart. For some, I think it's like when you're 2 little plants planted in a really big pot and it feels like you have forever. At a certain point, your roots are strangling each other and you don't realize it and you need to be replanted somewhere else. I wrestle with like, do I hope that they come back into my life sometime? I don't know. Or do I like close that chapter? But I think ultimately we're all done like a great disservice by understanding relationships of all kinds in this binary of like either it lasts forever or it was like this doomed fated thing, as opposed to like some of the best people and relationships in your life last X amount of time and they still are good, you know?
Yeah, they're seasonal sometimes, and that happens. And sometimes it's locational. I mean, a lot of the friendships I have haven't ended so much as they just aren't close anymore because the proximity is no longer there. And I hope I would get to see them again and spend time with them in a meaningful way. But I understand that that's unlikely to happen for most of them.
Yeah, it's just like, that's the thing, is that it's just, we're kind of like out here in our own little think tanks, like trying to figure this out without cultural things to ping off of, without kind of like some things, you know, that women have is like passed down sort of generationally, like this is how you cope. Yeah. But there's like no conversations about, okay, it's your first big friendship breakup. This is how that goes. Like, let's go get ice cream and watch a movie. Like, there's no recourse for that. And I feel like it's so hard to bring up and talk about because, like you said, people are like either immediately, what did you do? Or I think sometimes people go to like, how is this hurting you so much? Like, were you secretly in love with this person? Like, how could you have this much feeling? And you're like, how does no one around me have friendships that mattered as much as like mine did to me? Like, but I think it's like this very deep hurt that a lot of us are carrying around and don't know what to do with.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we could talk about this forever.
I know.
But you handled it beautifully in the book. I'm intrigued when you said you're working on something new that kind of focuses on this. Is this a fictional project or is it?
This one is it would be my next nonfiction book, and it would be a kind of collection of essays and other interviews, other stories, trying to kind of collect cultural group knowledge about this experience and orient it and understand it. And kind of process it from different ages, from different experiences, trying to find pairs of friends who have split up and like see both experiences and all that kind of stuff. So it's out right now. If you want to put a shout out to the publishers, you're welcome.
Our agent Amy will, but she's reminding you that there are novels as well. So she would like you to talk about the novels. And that was my next question. So I'm just going to let Amy ask. Tell us about the novels. What are you working on? What genres? Where are they? Have you nanoed them to death already? Was that part of the 10,000 words you were working on?
So one of them I've been working on since I went to Scotland. And it's sort of changed as I have, which is why I think it's been on my plate for so long, but I really love it. It's about, now this is going to sound familiar, but like any relation to people living or dead is completely coincidental and all characters are a figment of the author's imagination. Okay. It's about a girl who's about to turn 30 and runs away to Scotland, I don't know, in search of love that she thinks she's after, and ends up learning that she needs something entirely different. It's kind of women's fiction because there's a huge story about the women in this family.
Well, it's either going to be women's fiction or possibly true crime, but I'm glad that you pulled it in.
Yeah. There's another one in the pipeline that's like a crime situation, but not true, hopefully, not yet.
Don't manifest that one.
But it's not yet, meaning you haven't committed the crime yet. Get that lobster's handcuffs for DEVRIE.
I'm going to send those my way. Well, they'll probably fit.
Could also be in the women's fiction for like, ooh, hurt me. Okay, but that's different. If it's consensual, that's different, guys. We're not talking about that.
Very different. No, so this one is sort of about, it's the main character. She lives in Los Angeles. Her grandma and her mom are there. It's this kind of codependent situation, and she is in love with a longtime best friend. She thinks he's going to tell her that he's in love with her too. He's finally realized something goes wrong. She decides, okay, I'm going to run away to Scotland where my estranged aunt lives and try to find one of these hulky Highlanders who wear kilts and that he has a problem with because he didn't get cast on the show Highlander. And see if I can flirt with them on the internet and make him like awaken in him this jealousy, this love for me. So she runs away to her strange aunt's cottage, and hijinks ensue. And of course, the running away of the daughter to the estranged aunt draws some bad guys from home over to Scotland, and lots of things collide in this little cottage on a cliffside in a small town with a quirky cast of characters as our young heroine tries to understand what is the difference between the love she's been taught she deserves and the love she truly does. And what cast of characters, including the very hot kilted man, indeed teach her that lesson.
Oh,
that one's very fun.
Really good pitch.
Love that one a lot. And also there's like, the intergenerational stuff between women, like what we pass down, what we run away from, what we cope with, like who breaks the cycles, what does it cost them to do so, is a big part of the central core of that story. And then I've got some other little things cooking. I've got a little New York City romance featuring like kind of a book talker who accidentally goes viral critiquing the like biggest author on Book Talk and essentially gets put up to make her own like version of what this person writes to prove that she could do it better. But she has a big secret, and that is she's never been in love. So she tries to enlist an old friend that she used to have a crush on when she was a kid, who's a real playboy, to sweep her off her feet for like 1 week in New York City, and put all the moves on and essentially do like a fake romance to kind of give her the content she would need to write a banging romance novel. And so as you can guess, hijinks ensue, I will say.
Hijinks. The hijinks.
Yeah. There may be banging for educational purposes, but yes, for research, you know what I mean? Tax deductible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one's very fun as well. And I have all kinds of things going. I got a little flower shop
the ideas
series.
Percolate.
I have a little murder mystery on a cruise ship featuring an older protagonist. That one's very fun. It's like Knives Out meets the Golden Girls. Yeah.
Is it just called Golden Knives? Because I think there's your title.
That'd be pretty dope. Or just Knife Girls. I love that a lot.
It's too close to the Spice Girls, which
which isn't bad. That's not a bad thing.
It works. I could make that work. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm excited about what you've got going on. You're gonna have to come back when the next book comes out. And
can't wait.
Awesome sauce. We're closing in on an hour here. So
perfect.
That went by really fast. Thank you, DEVRIE, for being here. Thank you,
Yeah.
Allison, of course. We are off the next couple weeks because I am going to Morocco.
Oh,
girl. Like, yay. So hopefully we'll be back at the beginning of September, and mark your calendars. We've got some fun things going on in December. Of course, Allison and I will do our yearly eggnog extravaganza where we get drunk on eggnog and talk about just nonsense.
Cool. Yeah. I will be in the comments for that one with my own nog. I'll be nogging it with you guys. It's nog time, baby.
It's nog time, baby.
And Amy is saying t-shirt fodder, tax deductible banging. I'm hearing that on merch for us now. Tax deductible banging.
Yeah, I get a cut. Okay, those.
Is that golden knife?
The golden knife.
That's like exactly right. Just like the cheese plate we've got working up there, Allison.
I ate all my provolone, but I still have some feta left.
I've got a mushy cheese.
Don't eat that.
Sticks. I'm not going to.
I just ate a quesadilla right before this, so
yum. Mm-hmm. All right, friends. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a delight.
Thank you.
Bye.